Hi, and welcome to another edition of the NAIC Insight Series. I'm your host, Bob Greene, and I am delighted to be joined today by Renae Griffin, Managing Director, GCM Grosvenor, and my longtime friend. Welcome, Renae.
Bob, it's so awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I've been looking forward to our conversation, Renae. So, Renae, for the few folks that don't know you, tell us about what you do at GCM Grosvenor.
Well, first of all, Bob, I do have to again thank you because, after 20 years, I would have never imagined sitting here sort of recounting our history together. We tease each other. We talk about we're both RG and we're both Tauruses. So I really thank you, my brother, for just this opportunity.
Oh, it's my
But
pleasure.
a little bit about my role at Grosvenor. So I joined Grosvenor in 2017. I was brought on to help us build and expand our small, emerging, and diverse manager practice. And it's been pretty exciting. It's actually been better than I imagined. Joining Grosvenor was sort of like marrying my old high school sweetheart. We knew each other from the early days of RG and Associates, and when Credit Suisse was independent of Grosvenor. We were sort of from the same hood, so we spoke the same language around the importance of diversity and creating opportunities for emerging managers, and we have the same values. I mean, my commitment has been to, help minority and women get access, and so has theirs. And we believe that you can, do well and do good. So, the honeymoon phase, we're still in it, but the marriage, it really has been fruitful.
That's outstanding. So Renae, you mentioned that you've been at Grosvenor 6 years, but so many people in this industry are younger and really only know people in the roles they're in now. But you have this amazing history that I'm excited to be a part of helping share today. Tell us, let's go back. Tell us how you got into the finance industry.
Um, I mean, if you really want to go back, Bob, I'm going to have to take you on a little journey about my life and my upbringing. And you want to go there, right?
That's what we're here for.
Okay, cool. Well, I would say that, I was a little visionary who wanted to have impact. Basically, grew up in Fresno during the 60s and 70s, during a time where, fighting for fairness and social and economic justice was just blaring everywhere. It was a bold and vibrant time. Fists were in the air, and James Brown, who was one of my favorite artists, you could hear his song playing, Say It Loud, I'm Black and
Mhm.
I'm Proud. I actually did a dance to that as part of a dance troupe I was in. So it was a very interesting time. My parents, we lived in a sort of middle class neighborhood. My dad owned a Shell gas station, and my mom was a homemaker by choice. And my brother, my parents and I, we lived in this typical Black neighborhood where you had nice homes in, one area on certain streets, and then crappier homes on others. But the point I want to make around that is that we were one big community, and your neighbors, you knew your neighbors, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins were within walking distance, and it was truly an era where Black identity and supporting community was paramount. And one of the benefits I had as a young, girl growing up were these community centers, and we joked a little bit about that before the call. But one center I used to frequent was the Umoja Community Center, and Umoja stood for unity. And so we were wearing dashikis, and my mom had made one for me. I still have it today, by the way, and afros, sort of like the one I have now. But what was beautiful about that center was that it taught us Black history African culture, arts and crafts, African dance. We would hear speeches from powerful leaders on economic power and the importance of building business and investing in the community. So it was exciting, but it was very challenging. It was very, very challenging. And what was challenging for me, again, as a young Black girl, dark skin, big lips, pretty outspoken, was being bused over to a white school where I faced pretty much daily discrimination and had to prove myself. I mean, so many of us have this story, right? Mine is no different. We had to work harder, be smarter. There was always this pressure to that I was not average. So, I excelled in sports, I excelled in academics, and I would say the biggest challenge was acclimating, having to, be Renae Griffin in the white school with the, proper English, and then go back to being Renae on the block with, my neighborhood friends and peers. But, I was pretty strong-headed. I was adamant about sort of smashing through the stereotypes that we were plagued with during that time. So that's the early journey. But how I really got into finance was, I determined at a very early age that finance was the field for me. Being taught about economic power and knowing that money, in many cases, was a great equalizer and could help break through barriers, help create better experiences, and just create a better way of life for me. That was the field that I chose. And so my very, very first position, well, I would say one of my first positions was in the 80s at Bankers Trust at a commercial, I was in a commercial real estate division. And I mean, it was so long ago, we were still transitioning from typewriters to computers. And then I left there, Bob, and began working with Cap Guardian Trust Company. And I was at Cap Guardian for 9 years. I had this real, just great opportunity to work with one of the most powerful and legendary Black women in the industry today. She was so generous. She opened up her kimono. She shared her Rolodex. And yes, we called them that back in the day. And she basically said, go forth, little grasshopper, and conquer. And she really did expose me to a lot. I began hosting events and dinners and putting on these pretty grand affairs, which really laid the groundwork for the business that I later launched. And this was Pamela Joyner, by the way. She introduced me to Mark Kazanoff, and I want to go back to talk at some point about the power of the network, because from Pam, I met Mark, who was the founder of Progress Investment Management Company. And Marx had built this infrastructure, this firm that focused on investing with emerging and diverse managers in a manager of manager structure. So they were pioneers in the space. And it really was that Progress where, the Band-Aid just sort of got ripped off my eyes. And I could clearly see the disparity in the industry that existed for particularly minority firms. So I spent about 5 years at Progress, building my network, learning as much as I could about the space, worked my way up from assistant to the president to director of marketing. And, over that 6-year period, I will say that I didn't see the gap closing for women and minorities in the industry, but I saw it widening. And that's when I decided to launch my own firm, RG and Associates, to really bridge that gap and to create solutions for institutional investors and corporations looking to really diversify their business partners. So that put me, that was a lot, right? Starting from childhood and sort of taking you through the journey. But that's what, sort of teed me up to be where I am now.
No, Renae, I really appreciate you going back to your earliest days, because to know people and to understand them is to be familiar with where they came from. And seeing you in that California middle class Black community, but recognizing that it was a time of struggle, the movement was going on. I mean, you were even at a community center that was, referencing Ron Karenga's Nguzo Saba. So, clearly understand the power of unity. And I think it's so relevant because, as people will find out through this interview that don't already know, your career has been one of unifying and uplifting your people. So this is fabulous. Okay, so we have the early part of your career spent at Cap Guardian. You meet these two powerful luminary figures, that one that introduced you to the other, both that I know remain very active in supporting and championing you. And then we're going to skip for just a second the almost 20 years that you spent as an entrepreneur, doing everything that entrepreneurs do to build your business. But plug us back into today. How did you get to Grosvenor?
So after I had basically established my business, RG and Associates, one of the things that I wanted to do was help more emerging and diverse managers in a more direct way. And the way I thought to do that was to expand my consultancy and create an arm that, provided that level of support and helping them, get access to capital, helping them sort of build their marketing structures. Basically, it was a placement agency that I was looking to establish, but I thought it might create a conflict. So I looked to, find a partner or someone to acquire the assets that I have built in RG and Associates, and that's Consortium. And we'll talk, I'm sure, more about that. But I went to Grosvenor and I went to a couple other organizations to see if there would be interest. And I knew that Grosvenor had really demonstrated its commitment to uplifting and putting into the spotlight the alpha generating possibilities of emerging and diverse managers. So I saw them as a perfect partner. And as it turns out, they liked the idea, but it came with a catch. They said, if we acquire your, conference, will you join us? And that was not the original plan, but it became more and more tantalizing, not just because, Grosvenor is a big gorilla. It's because of the values. It's because of the commitment. It was a way that I could take what I'd done previously, even from childhood all throughout my career, and apply it to a institution that also saw the value in working with me. And so that's when I came on to help, build and expand, as I mentioned earlier, their small and diverse manager practice.
Outstanding. So let's dive into the part of the book and the story that everybody I think is really fascinated by and interested in. So Renae, there's this word that's been a part of your life for so many years. It truly is inextricably linked to your career, and it's the consortium. So what is the consortium?
Well, it is my baby. I look at it that way. It's a conference that I envisioned while at Progress. And it's more than a conference. It was really designed to be an educational platform for LPs, for consultants, for GPs, and particularly LPs to understand the value, the benefit, and the opportunity of the talent pool that we know are diverse women managers who have the ability to generate the type of returns that they're looking for within their portfolio. I strongly believed, as someone that was under sort of represented in, just society as a whole, and how challenging it was to get access and get visibility. I wanted to create that for people of color and women in our industry. And so it's been, I think, over the years, a catalyst for many LPs who were initially thinking about establishing emerging manager programs, and if not a program, some strategic initiative around it. I do know of several who have established those programs as a result of coming to Consortium year after year after year. Consultants alike, many of which, were getting pressured from their clients to find that talent. They were wanting that diversity within their portfolios. So consultants were coming to Consortium too, to learn and to access. And then GPs, my goodness. I've watched that universe just sort of ebb and flow. People come and go, but now we're at a point where that universe is so vast. We've seen over the last 3 years the GP community expand in a way that we haven't seen in my history, over the last 20 years. So the talent is there. And Consortium has been, also I think a marketing place, a place if you're looking for capital, if you're looking to meet top LPs from around the country and have a fair look, you could do that at Consortium. And there are a couple mechanisms that we designed to bring people together. One is our VIP Connect session where we still today curate one-on-one meetings, and those one-on-one meetings have been instrumental. I've had some LP or GPs say to me, I met my first 2 or 3 or 4 LPs at Consortium. And I've had the same conversation with LPs who said, we have funded managers as a result of those introductions at Consortium. So I would say over the last 20 years, we've brought together over, close to 7,000 LPs and GPs to be a part of our program. We've seen hundreds of relationships established. And I will say this, it hasn't just been on my back. It's been on the back of so many supporters, sponsors.
Okay, hold on. We're going to get there. I'm going to slow you down. I know we're going to get there, Bob. You're answering all of my questions. You're answering all my questions before I can get them out. So let's stay here for a moment. Renae, let's stay here for a moment. Okay. So you are an entrepreneur who, like so many successful entrepreneurs, you saw a need in the marketplace and you did not look around and say, hey, let me share this with somebody. They should go do this. You took it upon yourself. You said, I'm going to be the solution. This was not a quick idea and you started doing it. You nurtured it over time. Tell us a little bit about the nurturing of the idea, because as I understand it, there were a number of years between when you thought of it and when you actually had your first conference in 2003, right? And so for those who haven't done the math or haven't heard you, this is a 20-year journey. This is the 20-year anniversary of this business that you launched. Tell us about the motivation and the incubation of this idea.
Happy to do that. So you're right. I launched RG & Associates in 2001. But here's what happened immediately. I launched a few months before 9/11 hit. And when 9/11 hit, I was like, oh my God, what have I done? I had taken out a small home loan. I had hired an assistant. I was working out of my home. And I knew my timing was just off, but I was hell-bent on just making the Debbie Doubters and the negative Nicks wrong. Because I believed and I was confident that I had found and was forming a company that would be a part of the solution and not the problem. And because of that, that we would be able to prosper. And so I did reach out to my network because it's all about community, right? I reached out to Pam Joyner, to Mark Kazanoff, to my good friend Nancy Sims at Toego and Sue Toego. And I said, you know, and this was actually before I launched, I said, if I launch this company, will I be able to establish relationships? Do you have any ideas? Can you let me know if there's some opportunities that you offer? And so one of my very first conferences that I put on was a NAS conference. And most of you know of the National Association of Securities Professionals. NAS was the first conference I ever attended when I entered this business in 1993. As a matter of fact, I'm sorry. As a matter of fact, oh geez. Okay. Sorry about that, everyone.
No
You
problem.
won't believe who that was. That was Derek Jones.
Right.
By the way, who runs our private equity platform at Grosvenor. And you know, when I was at that conference, I saw all these incredibly smart, you know, brown and Black people, and it really gave me the inspiration to look at how I could build something similarly. I also, at Progress, used to attend many conferences, and I realized how some of them, not all of them, weren't really conducive to building relationships. So I began to lay the groundwork and the framework for what I would want to build through RG and Associates. But in the interim, you know, I was hired by different organizations, AIM, NASP, New American Alliance, SEO, Toego. We did work together with NAIC, and working with all these organizations also gave me just a lot of insight on what I could create through Consortium. So it was those relationships, the networks, listening and observing the bigger problem, which was the lack of access to capital, that I said, let me build a specific solution for. And then, you know, it's always something that pushes you sort of over the top, that makes you get off your butt and do it, right? And so I remember going to a conference, and I thought I was competing for this piece of business that I was sort of hopefully going to win. And there was an RFP process, and that process, I was told, was sort of put on hold. But when I went to that event, I learned that RFP, they had already sourced a company to service them for that event. And I was like, oh my goodness, you know, how come no one notified me? And I said, you know what? That's okay. That's okay. I'm going to start my own damn conference. And that made me get off my butt. And by 3 months later, Consortium had been launched. So a lot of motivating factors there, Bob.
Absolutely. And appreciate you sharing the precursor of what I will affirm for you has, to this date, in my opinion, been the finest conference and most valuable networking. And you know, I wave the NAIC flag and banner all day long, but what you created in the in the consortium is well worth the attention that people pay it. It's well worth the 20 years that you've spent working on it. And I'm just delighted to be able to share with you after 20 years how much you have meant to this industry and how much you mean to your friends at NAIC personally. Congratulations to you, Renae. So let's talk a little
Thank
bit,
you,
Renae, about the skills and characteristics that enabled you to successfully navigate this non-traditional career path, right? Not a lot of people who sit as an MD in one of the major firms in the industry can look back and trace their start as an assistant to a president, right? Not a lot of people can trace their journey through an entrepreneurial path that brought them alongside the industry. But, you know, it's not like you in those days could have said, well, there are 20 people that do what I do. No, you created your own seat at the table and you developed your own path. And that's what's so laudable. But if I say the word, I think there are a number of words that people attribute to you, but it's very clear that you had a vision, right? Talk to us a little bit about the characteristics of having a vision as an entrepreneur and what that means to identify what the vision is.
Well, you know, when I think about vision, it definitely started when I was younger, and you know, I correlate a lot of my experience to my past.
Mhm,
Things weren't always great for our family.
mhm,
You know, things began to get really rough in my neighborhood. It became, you know, a place where you saw more drugs, prostitution,
mhm,
and just more of an unhealthy environment. My
mhm,
father, unfortunately, lost his Shell gas station. My parents separated. And I felt, you know, as a young girl, my family was just falling apart. And I
mhm,
remember my mom and my brother and I breaking our very last bank. It was a big giant Buddha. It was full of coins. And I knew when that bank broke that we were in trouble. And so my
mhm,
mom ended up going back to school, and there were all these job opportunities in the neighborhood for, you know, Black and brown um, young people. And so I began working at the age of 12, and I never stopped. And I say
mhm,
all that to say, I had a vision in all of that and dealing with all those obstacles to build a successful life for myself. And I knew, in spite of the difficulties, that I was going to do that. So I've always believed and envisioned myself being where I am today. And I believe through economic empowerment, particularly through this finance industry,
mhm,
was my ticket. And I never lost sight of that.
mhm. Outstanding. So another word, and they're going to be four words, Renae. And I didn't come up with these by myself. Some of our mutual friends helped me. But another word people attribute to you is innovator, right? The innovation
Mm.
that you've brought to the platform. Talk to us, if you accept that word as a characteristic of yours, talk to us about innovation and how that has worked and been a part of what you do.
Yeah, you know, Bob, I already, you know, sort of mentioned that in when I started my business, it was right before 9/11. So I had to learn how to pivot sort of out of the gate. And pivoting for me meant being creative and being innovative to bring new ideas to the business. And, you know, the other thing I have to throw in there is faith because,
Mhm,
you know, when you're having to pivot, you have to have faith. And faith for me is being sure of what I hope for and certain of the things I do not see. So
mhm,
when I launched Consortium, we were like having sold out events year after year after year from 2004 up until the GFC. And when the
mhm,
GFC hit, the great financial crisis, um, it was scary. It was scary because I wasn't sure what impact and the aftermath of the industry's the market's demise would have on my business, and particularly, you know, this industry of small emerging and diverse managers. And so one of the things that I decided was we have to build some, you know, programs within Consortium that
mhm,
support the managers where they are today. And what they needed were strategies to really sustain and survive
mhm,
during the great GFC, because, you know, it was a time where you didn't know if you were going to be able to raise capital. There were a lot of institutions that were taking their eye off of emerging manager initiatives and focusing on what they considered their majority assets.
mhm,
And I did see where there was a definite reduction in the amount of capital flows to emerging and diverse managers for years. So the boot camp was a way to help sort of strap them up and
Yeah.
prepare for when the market started moving in a more positive direction, that they were better prepared. And that's when we introduced like pitching sessions and our boot camp coaching. We also felt like LPs needed to understand, if they weren't looking at emerging managers who in that period of time
Mhm.
were oftentimes more nimble, more able to make adjustments within the portfolio. If they weren't looking at investing in those managers, then shame on them. They were missing out on opportunities. So we created the LP intensive to
Yeah.
get the LPs in the room, to keep the focus, keep the lens on the importance and the value add of this community of managers. So those were a couple things that, just through a challenging period of time where there was so much uncertainty, that we built some very effective and
Yeah.
impactful programming that's still a part of Consortium today.
Renee, one of the things in having worked with you for almost the full 20 years that was always so impressive to me is you had this amazing ability to track all of the details. I've teased you for years about how intricate your model was, and, being able to get, each beverage down to the tax and the quantity and all of that. And then at the same time, being willing and able to innovate, where a lot of people don't know this, you would execute the conference. You would take about a week off, right? Cleaning everything up, relaxing, chilling, and then you would get right back at it. And the right back at it for you was thinking about next year. And I always marveled at that, because as a woman running her own business, RG and Associates, with this premium product that she developed, most people can't do both ends. They can't do the detail and the finite, and then also do the big and the grand and the evolutionary. So I again, very complimentary there. I'm not going to tax you with the next word because you kind of already talked about it, but the next word that people attributed to you was courageous. And you talked about, the
Mhm.
challenges and the global financial crisis. I'm going to move you on to leadership. And when we answer the leadership
Mm.
question, I want you to talk about leadership, but I also want you to mention some of the people along the way that you drew inspiration from and you collaborated with. And you can't mention me. We've already acknowledged that you and I work together. Who are the other folks out there, Renae, that you have collaborated with around building this extraordinary platform?
Well, Bob, you were up there on my list. So
I'm excluded.
let me just say, I never really viewed myself as a leader. I always
Mhm.
considered myself to be this behind the scene kind of girl, really propping other people up and shining the light on them. So that wasn't in my sort of mindset. But what I would say is that I tried to apply my natural born talents and let those guide and direct me to the best of my ability. And there were people in my life that saw my natural talents, and they encouraged me, they supported me, they dove in there with me and even helped to teach me. And as I said, open up that kimono, share the Rolodex. And these people have been my angels, my heroes and sheroes. And I'm really, really grateful for them. And some, I had to start with just even my mom. My mom, um, gee whiz. And I know there's a group from the industry, but there's the group from my life, right? That if not for them, I wouldn't be where I'm at. And so
Mhm.
my mom was someone who, as I mentioned, went back to school, demonstrated to me what pivoting really meant, what
Mhm.
being determined, being committed, believing that you could be more than what you were, and displaying that courage and leadership as a mother. I got that from her. And the other thing I got from my mother were the values, a spiritual foundation that I really adhere to today. And she's one of those people that, is the happiest, most positive person I know. And she taught me that, and I try to remember some of the teachings around peace being one of those things that if you don't have peace, you don't have anything at all. That's one of the things she repeats to me still today. And then of course, my father. My father is bold, courageous, tough. He's still around. He's a serial entrepreneur. Even during COVID, he, at the age of 83, reopened his business, Jazzy's Jeans and Things in Fresno. But he was tough. I remember when I was, a young girl, he would tell me, once I got a C on my report card, that he did not rage average kids. And so, those are things that stuck with me. And so he showed leadership. He also said, don't ever spank your ass for what you've done in the past. Get up from that day forward and keep moving. So inspiration there. But some of the people just from, the industry, I have to go back to Mark Kazanoff. He was the first person I talked to about launching my business. He was the one that said, go for it, Renae, and then laid the groundwork and resources to help me get there. He also taught me the art of marketing. He and Pam Joyner, they were like master marketers, right? And one thing Mark said to me, I'll never forget, he said, listen, when you have an opportunity to meet someone, make sure you get to know them, build a relationship, build trust. He said, and just know on that initial meeting, they're not interested in knowing about you. They are interested in hearing what you know about them. And that has stuck with me, and it's a tool I use today, and it's gotten me far because I really do care about other people, and I really want to have, again, impact and help bring, solutions to any of the problems that they have. I would also say my good friend Taurus Richardson, who when I started RG and Associates, he was a person that said, look, I'll be your partner. I was introduced to him through Nancy Sims at Towigo, and he and I sat down, paper and pen, and started mapping out the framework for Consortium. And he's one of those big thinkers. So he really had me think above and beyond where I initially thought I could build this conference. And then, of course, Nancy Sims and Sue Towigo, who were there from the beginning. We sat down and we said, how do we collaborate? And, Towigo was launching the gala. I was launching Consortium. And so we decided, let's host those two programs conjunctively. And so for the last 19 years, our programs have been running together. This will be the first year that we haven't been able to do that as we're celebrating our 20-year anniversary. And that makes me a little sad, but it was more because logistics, we just couldn't align our dates. But very, very instrumental in the growth and success of Consortium.
Yeah, uniting the Towigo.
What's that?
I was going to say before you go, uniting the Towigo Gala and the Consortium was brilliant. And the way you all carried it off, people did the entire Consortium during the day. They accomplished their business. They got to go to Towigo and marvel at the lovely gala and be impressed by all the fabulous Towigo alums. It really was a wonderful marriage that you all brought together on those two platforms.
Absolutely. And I have to, point to Grosvenor as well, because when I look at the early days, CFIG, Grosvenor was there. they were sponsors, they were advisors, they were really entrenched in the space and looking to source the talent and bring their thought leadership to the program. So as a partner now, and Consortium is on the Grosvenor platform. I mean, I never would have imagined 20 years later having this type of relationship, but uh, clearly, and just doing a commercial for Grosvenor, I consider them to be the preeminent thought leaders and experts in the field, and truly, truly committed. Um, and if I may add this about Grosvenor, some of you may know, some of you may not know this, but Grosvenor is a global alternative investment firm, and we manage about 74 billion in assets. I've watched those assets grow the last 5 years, 6 years, more than 40%. And of that 74 billion that we managed to date, about 13.8 billion has been invested with diverse managers, and about, I would say, 10 billion just in private equity. You heard me mention Derek Jones earlier. He is the head of the platform, but we have a very diverse team of women of across all ethnicities, and it's just a very, I think, natural fit, and has been a natural fit for me. So they've been an ultimate partner as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So, Renae, it wouldn't be you and I if we didn't talk about the industry. We've done it many times in many cities over a few glasses of wine, but lots of success. We have a lot of
Anytime.
we have a lot of friends in this industry that have been very successful. But Renae, the sober reality is, despite all of the success, diverse managers are still below 2% of total allocations. And I know you
Yeah.
share my concern around that. But what's the state of things, and where do we go from here?
Well, Bob, this is truly what keeps me up at night, and especially into today's environment. And I'm going to put a positive spin on this. I promise. But I think we're at a real pivotal point in our industry. We have all these dust kickers, right, around anti ESG and anti DEI. And by the way, I don't think these issues should be ignored. But that's another subject that we won't tackle right now. And let me just say before I make my comments that these are my views and not necessarily those of Grosvenor. I just want to be clear on that. We all know we're dealing with the denominator effect that's impacting, PE allocations, and especially to smaller managers. We now as of Friday have this looming bank crisis and the contagions that are possibly happening as a result, and just continuous market volatility. I think the other thing that concerns me is, yes, we have an amazing growing universe of emerging and diverse manager talent, but the capital flows are really shrinking. And it's estimated that 1 in 15 managers will likely survive. So that's not the best news, but what I would say is that particularly after this call I had with a group of who we call the Consortium Leadership Council. This council is comprised of some of the most prominent institutional investors from around the country. And we're all, scratching our heads saying, what can we do? What can we do? In light of all the things that I just mentioned, right? And one of the things that we talked about was making sure that institutional investors were being educated, were being exposed. Like, that part did not stop. And it's a little tougher in an environment where people aren't traveling as much. You're in these Zoom environments, but we have to get institutional investors in the room talking to each other, exchanging information on performance, comparing notes on managers, and making stronger commitments, right? Being very, very, very explicit, as we've seen some foundations do with the 25 by 25, allocating 25% of their assets by 2025. Like, just sticking a stake in the ground and saying, here's what we are going to do. Not compare it so much to our peers, but what we think is important and what we think will move the needle. And so we just need more institutions to take that type of deliberate stand, establish more policy that is ingrained within their institution. It outlives them, it outlives the board, but it's there, it's implanted and rooted. Um, Making sure that they're thinking about some of these newer practices, newer strategies for investing with diverse individuals. And there are many. We'll be talking about them at Consortium, so put it on your calendar and come on out. But another big thing we talked about, Bob, was, and I think you would attest to this, back in 2004 and even prior to that, the industry as we know it today had far more diverse decision makers sitting on boards, sitting in CIO roles or senior investment officer roles. There were, different legislators being very vocal, treasurers that were taking a hard stance on diversity, and then making sure that we were getting to the table. What I've seen recently, and we talked about this as I just mentioned, that there's been a reduction of women and minority managers in those roles today, and that to me is where we have to begin to concentrate and then help those that are in those seats to feel more empowered so that they can continue to stand up and speak out, and not for the sake of just inclusion. I read something that came across my desk and I loved it, and I'll attribute it to him. It was IMB's tagline that said, diversity is an asset. Mm-hmm. So if we can begin to think about diversity not being a liability, but an asset, and looking at diverse and women managers as alpha generators, right? As that, talent pool that is available to help reach your investment goals. And I think we can begin to transform the industry and change that less than 2% to, whatever number is appropriate. And we don't, one could say double. I don't think double is enough, right? Because if you're already starting behind the start line, getting up to the start line, it's not enough, right? We want to excel far beyond that. So those are just my views. And I said my views alone, but what do you think, Bob?
Well, Renae, we're not going to get into what I think. We're not going to get into what I Absolutely. We're not going to get into what I think because it's your interview, but I agree with much of what you said.
Right.
And I think that there's so much more that has to be done to move the conversation. If you think about the early days of Consortium, we spent a lot of time introducing what an emerging manager program was. And there wasn't a single conference where we didn't talk about, well, how do you define emerging and what are your attributes? And to me, the world has moved beyond whether it's a first, second, or third time fund under $2.5 billion or a spin out of a firm. I mean, that's almost semantics now. The real question is, do you believe that these brown and Black people can invest capital, can produce returns, can hire talented people and can grow and expand companies. And I think there are too many examples that you have helped highlight, and at NAIC and NASP and AIM and New America Alliance and PE Win, all of us have joined forces to highlight this, and yet we still find ourselves stuck under 2%. So I know one thing, there's just a lot more work to be done. But let me ask you two more questions, Renae. If you could do anything in your career over, you have the opportunity to change anything about your career, what would you change and why?
You know, Bob, this question, I told with it a bit because I don't really think about many do-overs
Mhm.
today. And I guess because, you know, when I look at the path that I've been on, I feel it's been ordained. I feel it's been
Mhm.
purposeful. And if I were to redo anything or change anything, that would alter where I am today. And I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy with my life. I'm pretty happy with my career. I'm pretty um happy with this journey, and I know it continues. But here's one thing. I did think about this. I said, because I'm all about the women, right? And the
Mhm.
women of color in our industry getting more visibility. Because I do feel like we are the underrepresented of the underrepresented, the undercapitalized of the undercapitalized.
Mhm.
So now my focus is on how do we um, all collectively, women, no matter what your ethnicity is, but everyone in this industry began to focus on women of color. I can count them on my hand. So here's one thing I thought about. I said, okay, if I could do something differently, um, I wish I had launched a women and women of color fund of funds
Mhm.
and somehow got Grosvenor to acquire it. That would be like the ultimate, right? But
Absolutely.
just seriously, I don't have a lot of regrets, Bob. I think I will regret if I don't find a way to have more impact and as I said, be able to help more women of color, help create a pathway for some of the youth coming into our industry and letting them know that regardless of their background, regardless of the neighborhood that they're from, or any of that, that they deserve to be here. But no major regrets.
Okay, so now when you and I did our planning for this, you resisted this question and you agreed to allow me ultimately to ask it. And so now I'm going to ask the question, and I hope that you are willing to give me a real answer. The question, Renae, is you mean a lot to so many of us. And as we all look at our career, the question I would ask you is how do you want to be remembered? What is your legacy?
You know, this is tough, right? You're right. It is tough. But I will say, I had, and you will hear me talk about Marx because he just means that much to me. But we had a lunch a few months ago in California, and he just sort of turned me around before we left, and he looked at me. He was teary eyed, and he said that he was so proud of me.
Mm.
He was proud because the work that he had embarked upon at Progress to help women, nurse managers, that work had continued through me, and that I was a part of his legacy. And I thought about that and I said, you know, if someone could say that about me, that would be enough.
Mm.
That would be enough for me because I do hope my work inspires others to do all that they can do to change whatever condition or situation that they see that is not fair and equitable. And I just want to, again, encourage our young people that they too have a gateway, um, and a pathway to that they should be able to see themselves in. If they just believe in their own inner spirit, if they sort of slay the naysayers and believe that they can accomplish their dreams, like I did at that little girl in Fresno, and then pass that on to someone else, like Marx did to me, then that's my legacy, Bob. I
That's
would be
awesome.
very happy with that.
That is an awesome legacy, and I'll take a moment of personal privilege and share with you, as is always my responsibility to represent the members of NAIC, just how grateful so many people are to the little girl from Fresno. I had an occasion to speak with David Greene and Frank Baker,
Mm.
and they couldn't stop talking about what you had accomplished in helping their firm. Jose Feliciano said the same thing to me. Juan Sabator and Joe Haslip said the same thing to me. You are one of the few people in this industry that is universally high regarded and greatly appreciated because of what you've done for so many people. So, Renae, on the 20th anniversary of the consortium, I want to tell you a deep and sincere thank you to everybody for everything that you've done for this entire industry. And with that, Renae, would you like a final word, or would you like us to close out?
No, what I like to say is I want to thank everyone. I want to thank everyone on this call. I want to thank every person that's ever attended a consortium or an NAIC conference or NAA or AIM or a SEO or a PEWIN or a TWIGO or any, because this community is what's built this. The Frank Bakers, the Clear Lakes, the Vistas, the Ulu Ventures, the Avances, the Avantex, like this community. And I've just been a part of it. So I want to thank you for the privilege of having me be a part of it and allowing me to do this work.
Wouldn't have had it any other way. Renae, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for being courageous and sharing with us. Thank you for your story and your journey. And we're all looking forward to seeing you in a couple of months at the 20th anniversary of the consortium. God bless you, Renae. We love you.
Right on. Mwah!
Yep.
Love you too. Bye,
All right.
everyone.
Bye-bye.